Hey, y'all.
Good morning.
Hey, I'm figuring out who everybody is in this group chat now instead of it just saying 7 blobs.
Yeah, I'm adding names to some numbers.
Hey, I know this is, never mind. Has anybody read Children in Time? I'm new.
Yeah, we got
thinking about.
Children in Time.
Angela needs to read it. It's got space spiders.
I will let her know.
It's
Ooh.
awesome. I'm only halfway through. It may take a wrong turn, but so far it's really, 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 really good.
Who's the author?
Yeah.
Andrei, I think, Tchaikovsky. It's just I'm enjoying it so much. It's a civilization of space spiders.
Excellent.
And their evolution through time. That's half of it.
Fantastic. No, it sounds like something we would like.
It's so good.
I'm adding it to my queue as we speak.
I wonder if it's on Scribd. Let's see.
There's more of them. I think it's a trilogy. I'm only in 3. Chris has been like, "You're gonna love the space spiders, Teresa," and I have been putting it off because it's big. But he's right. I love the space spiders a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa and Shelby, for getting on at short notice. And so those of you who are tuning in about now, this is St. Junia United Methodist Church. And this is kind of like house church, only it's online. So if you're tuning in on Zoom or on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to let us know you're here by making a comment in the chat or liking. That gives us a way to count you. We'll get started in a few minutes. This is kind of the way we do house church, as people arrive, dogs come wandering through, people get the coffee. So
it's Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Adrian.
Yeah, one of those A words.
Now, is Children and Time? Is that what you said?
Children of Time.
Of Time. Okay, that would be a difference.
There's a lot of theological implications and human condition stuff too. It's just so good.
It sounds awesome. Yeah, there it is. Excellent. Since I'm traveling back and forth to Huntsville these days, I'm doing a lot of audiobooks. And I've been on. I need to get back into reading for enjoyment instead of reading for business. I just finished like The Body Keeps the Score and all this, other stuff for
which
job
is
purposes.
Better probably to listen to on audio than like
no,
that's.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is. I would like to get it just so I have something to underline footnotes in, but I'd like to have a hard copy, but it's been a while since I actually read something for me, so
yeah,
I will put that on my list.
Yes, this is delightful, or at least
that's awesome.
It's delightful. There are also hard questions that I'm like, I'm thinking about that too right now, but
yeah.
But it's in a good way. Like it's not actually my life, so yeah. I have that removal.
It's nice if it's close, but not too close.
Yeah,
that's the good thing about science fiction.
Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely. Is Rob getting on today, Miller? Or
yeah, I think I just saw him go back there.
And no, I'm not rushing. Just wondered how I need to divide up roles here.
There he is.
Hey, Rob. Good to see you, Rob. Hey, good morning. Yeah. We did the Pride Parade yesterday and or last night, and so I had it's funny because if I get in bed at like 11:30, that feels really late to me now. It's like, golly, it's so late. And
how was the parade?
It was good. It was good. It was bigger. The last time I went was pre-COVID, and so I compared to what it was pre-COVID, it was enormous. I mean,
Really?
different route. When it went through more Avondale and the east side of town, than going, down what was it? Down past 5 Points and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
really good attendance. I always love seeing a bunch of people I know and a bunch of people I don't know. Which is kind of, I guess that's sort of like the definition of a parade.
Yeah.
But it was good. There were some protesters, some who were obnoxious, but just at the beginning, and
Yeah.
apparently they had upgraded their sound system, so they were particularly annoying. But apart from that, it was
Not just the pamphlets telling you your
No.
eternal reward for
No,
being
this
in
is-
the parade.
yeah, but like the same signs. It's like, dude, get some new signs. Your signs are
Upgrade your
lame.
marketing.
That's right. Or don't. I mean, that would be actually probably the better thing is don't do that. But yeah, just lame. So I mean, boring. I mean, I don't know. I hate to rant about this. It's just like so boring. I existentially dull. Just hating on people. I don't know. Anyway, so let's get on with things. So Shelby, are you on? Are you there?
I'm here. I'm still waking up, but I'm here.
Let's start off with some la 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 la. I'm just teasing.
Exactly. It's 8 a.m. here on the West, and I don't have the luxury of Akira or a little soul like that to get me up and moving. So
Yeah.
Luxury is strong.
Yeah. Interesting choice of words there.
Yeah, well, we had, I mean, we do have, like, I've got 2 hours to kind of get up and get moving. We walked around outside today and it was lovely. So I'm feeling pretty good today. So let's see. How shall we do this? Teresa, would you mind being liturgist?
That's fine.
You do liturgy, and then Rob, voice of the people, and then Shelby, if you don't mind doing the Genesis reading.
got it.
And then Miller, if you will do the New Testament reading, that would be great. All right, let me go ahead and pull the liturgy up on the screen. Here we go. Y'all see that?
Yep. Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is the first Sunday after Pentecost. Today is the feast day of Saint Barnabas, who died in the year 61. He was born with the name Joseph, but was given the name Barnabas by the apostles, which means son of encouragement. He was an early convert to the church who sold his property and lived in community with the apostles. He was also one of the first leaders to accept Paul and encouraged others to do the same. Church tradition tells the story that he was the cousin of John Mark and that John Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark, but historians are skeptical of these claims. The book of Acts tells of how Paul and Barnabas had a falling out over John Mark, and they parted ways during one of the missionary journeys. According to tradition, Barnabas and Paul reconciled well before both were martyred. Today is also the day in 1963 when Alabama Governor George Wallace blocked the entrance of the University of Alabama. And National Guard troops cleared the way for the first Black students, Vivian Malone and James Hood, to register. Wallace had declared that segregation would last forever, and later in the day, President Kennedy made a public address in which he proposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Greetings from Resist Harm. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Hear these words of invitation.
The hospitality of God knows no bounds.
The love of God is immeasurable.
The generosity of God is beyond our wildest dreams.
We gather today as invited ones,
As beloved ones,
as blessed ones.
draw near and let us break the bread of life.
The translation of the Bible we're using today just disappeared.
I'm sorry.
Is the Common English Bible with modifications. Lectionary readings are from Revised Common Lectionary. Guess I didn't have to read that. Anyway.
It's okay.
Reading is from Psalm 31. All you who are righteous, shout joyfully to the Lord.
It's right for those who do right to praise God.
Give thanks to the Lord with the lyre.
Sing praises to him with the 10-stringed harp.
Sing to him a new song. Play your best with joyful shouts.
Because the Lord's word is right, his every act is done in good faith.
He loves righteousness and justice. The Lord's faithful love fills the.
The skies were made by the Lord's word, all their starry multitude by the breath of his mouth.
He gathered the ocean waters into a heap. He put the deep seas into storerooms.
All the earth honors the Lord. All the earth's inhabitants stand in awe of him.
Because when he spoke, it happened.
When he commanded, there it was.
The Lord overrules what the nations plan. He frustrates what the peoples intend to do.
But the Lord's plan stands forever.
What he intends to do lasts from one generation to the next.
The nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom God has chosen as his possession, is truly happy.
First reading comes from Genesis 12, 1 through 9. The Lord said to Abram, leave your land, your family, and your father's household for the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name respected, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Those who curse you, I will curse. All the families of the earth will be blessed because of you. Abram left just as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all of their possessions, and those who became members of their household in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land as far as the sacred place as Shechem at the oak of Morah. The Canaanites lived in the land at that time. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, I give this land to your descendants. So Abram built an altar there to the Lord who appeared to him. From there, he traveled toward the mountains east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and worshiped in the Lord's name. Then Abram set out toward the arid southern plain, making and breaking camp as he went.
Matthew 9, 9 through 13, and 18 through 26. As Jesus continued on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a kiosk for collecting taxes. He said to him, follow me, and he got up and followed him. As Jesus sat down to eat in Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners joined Jesus and his disciples at the table. But when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? When Jesus heard it, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor, but sick people do. Go and learn what this means. I want mercy and not sacrifice. I didn't come to call righteous people, but sinners. While Jesus was speaking to them, a ruler came and knelt in front of him, saying, my daughter has just died, but come and place your hand on her and she'll live. So Jesus and his disciples got up and went with him. Then a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years came up behind Jesus and touched the hem of his clothes. She thought, if I only touch his robe, I'll be healed. When Jesus turned and saw her, he said, be encouraged, daughter. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed from that time on. When Jesus went into the ruler's house, he saw the flute players and the distressed crowd. He said, go away, because the little girl isn't dead, but is asleep. But they laughed at him. After he had sent the crowd away, Jesus went in and touched her hand, and the little girl rose up. News about this spread throughout that whole region. May God bless the hearing of this word.
Thanks be to God.
From Barbara Brown Taylor's Speaking of Sin. My concern is that neither the language of medicine nor the language of law is an adequate substitute for the language of theology, which has more room in it for paradox than either of the other two. In the theological model, the basic human problem is not sickness or lawlessness, but sin. It is something we experience both as a species and as individuals in our existential angst and in our willful misbehavior. However we run into it as a as a wrecked relationship with God, with one another, with the whole created order. Sometimes we cause the wreckage, and sometimes we are simply trapped in it. But either way, we are not doomed.
Thank you all for getting us started with worship today. We'll go into a time of prayer. If you're tuning in from Facebook or YouTube, if you want to participate in our prayer and our discussion later, feel free just to type in the comments and we'll prayer requests and incorporate your comments into discussion. Yes, let's go to God in a time of prayer. God, who fashioned the cosmos and also who fashioned the cells in our bodies, so we give you thanks for the amazing grandeur, the incomprehensible nature of your creation. When we stop and ponder it, when we contemplate the fact that we get to be part of this amazing universe, we are astounded and overwhelmed. Sometimes, God, it's so overwhelming, we become inured to it. Our focus gets turned from the amazing creation that we're part of to the incessant problems of humanity, our own lack, our frustration. God, we are often trapped. We ask you to free us, to open the doors of our prisons, to help us see and perceive differently. Touch us and heal us. We lament for creation, for the way that we use it as an object instead of a glorious companion. We lament for the problems of war, especially when we hear about the places like Ukraine. We also recognize that there's conflict that develops in our own households. We ask you to change our understanding, that instead of looking at others as inferior or looking at a theology of deserving, we would come to understand that everything is gift. We lift up to you the struggles in our own lives. We lift up to you ourselves and our brokenness and ask for your attention and your healing. And I invite those of you who are listening to share. And I neglected to ask, would someone monitor Facebook?
I'm watching Facebook.
Thank you.
Prayers for Mari, Ayana, and Suzuna Katundu.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Sandra and her family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the Wilson family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Kaylee and my mom.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Allison and their family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For
the
Meg
help.
and Ben. Sorry.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the health of the Berry family.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For transgender children and adults.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Gratitude for a safe and celebratory parade last night.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Tony and
Lord,
everyone
hear our
else.
prayer. Oh, sorry. You broke up there, Shelby. You want to repeat that?
Sure. For Tony and everyone else facing sickness this morning.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Paul as she travels.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For the wildfires and everybody affected by the smoke.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Ruth.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For seniors and older people who are alone or lonely.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For Rob's parents as they travel to us.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Gracious God, for all the prayers that we've prayed out loud and for the prayers that we don't know how to pray, we give you thanks that you hear and that you answer. And we give you gratitude for the prayer that Jesus taught us. Holy One, our Mother and Father, let your name be revered. Let your reign come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. Give us today the bread we need for today, and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For yours is the sovereignty, the power, and the glory now and forever. Amen. So the lectionary, which is the set of readings that many churches do over a course of 3 years, today kind of throws us a curveball because there's like 3 stories in this one story. And it's kind of like I get to pick which one I want to focus on, which in some ways is nice, but it's hard because there's 3 great stories here. I want to touch on them, each one briefly, but I want to focus on the one today that's the one that starts this, which is the calling of Matthew. Matthew may have written this gospel. We don't really know. We don't really know who the author is, but tradition has it that it's this Matthew, that he's a tax collector. He's someone sitting near the Lake of Galilee, probably collecting taxes on the fish that Peter and James and John and Andrew were harvesting, so that they may have been bringing, essentially a cut of their profits to Matthew, who's in the tax collector's booth. And just so you understand a little bit about tax collecting back in the day, this wasn't like an IRS agent situation. This is a system called tax farming. And what would happen is the emperor would say, he would solicit bids from people in different territories on how much taxes they could collect. And then he would sort of back them up with the power of the army, right? So this is basically like Elon Musk decides that he's going to be tax collector for California. And he makes a bid. And the idea is, if you're wealthy, you want to bid high enough that you get the contract, but low enough that you'll be able to skim a lot off the top. Like that's kind of like your commission. So it's very clever. You're predicting how much money you're going to be able to extort from a certain population. This is essentially an extortion racket, right? It's just contracted and subcontracted. And so I want you to understand that Matthew is not just there as a representative of the government like an IRS agent. He's there because he made a bid. He sold out his neighbors and told someone higher up than him, he's probably a subcontractor, right? And he said, okay, well, I've already got, I've got a nice pool of cash over here. I can essentially put that up as collateral and I'll bid that I can get this much from the fishing industry in Galilee, which was a pretty big industry. I mean, Matthew's probably pretty wealthy because he had to be able to make a bid, because if he doesn't make his contract, he puts up the rest of it. And when you understand that, suddenly a lot of parables that Jesus tells begin to make a lot more sense, because the people did not understand that you got wealthy through hard work and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. The way you got wealthy was by selling out your neighbors. You had to have a certain amount of wealth to be in this position. And now you have the backing of the Romans to make other people, cough up the dough. This is the role that Matthew's in. He's got a booth. People come up and he gets to skim some off the top. So when Jesus comes and calls him, people naturally go, what the heck? Spiritual guru who's selling out his neighbors. I can imagine that part of what might be in the Pharisees' mind is, are you in it for the money? I think they may be thinking Jesus is a scam artist. I know how I would feel, if a preacher initially starts going to the very wealthy folks. However, what happens is Matthew leaves his booth behind and follows him. He's essentially, now remember, he had to put up a certain amount of money to have this job, and he just walked away from it. So when he leaves that behind, that's a big deal. And we can conjecture, again, you may have heard me talk before about when Jesus calls James and John, Peter and Andrew, and they leave their nets. Maybe they knew him beforehand. Maybe they aspired to be someone who follows an itinerant rabbi. I mean, that this Jesus was highly respected. But for whatever reason, Matthew decides that following Jesus is more important than the money that he put up to have this job. So like the fishermen walking away from their nets, he's walked away from a pile of money. Possibly. We don't know all the details, right? What we do know, and something I think is worth noticing, he gets up and Jesus says to him, actually, I'm going to pull it up here so you can see this with me, because I think this is amusing. So it says, Jesus said to Matthew, follow me. And Matthew got up and followed Jesus. And the next line is, as Jesus sat down to eat in Matthew's house. Now, I just want you to picture this. Someone comes up and says, follow me, and you get up and you follow them, and then you follow them back to your own house. Guess where we're eating today? I love this image of Matthew getting up and following, because it's follow me, and he's following Jesus. And Matthew starts thinking, where are we going? Oh, this looks familiar. Oh, this is my house. And they go in the front door. And then Jesus sits down and he says, all right, where's dinner? Right? This is a great image. This is what Jesus does. Now, he was an itinerant rabbi, so probably it was an honor to host him in the house. But I love the image of Jesus asking someone to follow them. They leave behind everything, and then Jesus brings them back to their own house. So they sit down and they start having dinner. And then the Pharisees say to Jesus' disciples, now notice they don't say it to Jesus, they say it to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? When Jesus heard it, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor, but sick people do. Go and learn what this means. I want mercy and not sacrifice. I didn't come to call righteous people, but sinners. There's a lot packed into these three lines. And this is kind of what I really want to dig into today. Let me pull this up here again, because I want you to see these lines. Healthy people don't need a doctor, but sick people do. Go and learn what this means. I want mercy and not sacrifice. I didn't come to call righteous people, but sinners. So there's a way of saying these lines that really just reinforces what the Pharisees were asking, right? Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Why is he hanging out with these slime balls, these people who are unworthy? And I want to share that this is like, that interpretation is most often what I've run into. When I started St. Junia, and I talked about that we would start as a reconciling congregation, which means we were going to be welcoming and affirming of LGBTQIA folks. That some of my colleagues heard me as I was talking about this and talking about the fact that there's all these people who the church has excluded and hurt and isolated who need healing, right? They heard it from the perspective of, oh yes, we are well. We are well and they are sick. So if you just start there, if that's all you hear in this statement, then it's easy to blow past this, and it remains non-transformative, condescending, arrogant, heterosexist. Well, not in this case, but it is that arrogant perspective that I am well because I've got Jesus and they are sick. And I don't think that's what Jesus is after here. Partially because of the next line and the last line. So the last line is, I didn't come to call righteous people, but sinners. You have to hear this through the lens of someone who would have studied Torah their whole life. So the Pharisees have grown up reading Torah, and they've read all the Psalms that talk about there is no one righteous, not one. And when you put this in context with Jesus' other statements, like when he goes and he finds the lost sheep, he said, there's more rejoicing in heaven over one lost sheep than there is over 99 who need no repentance. Everyone who heard that would have known there's not anyone who needs no repentance, right? Everyone's a sinner. No one is righteous. They would have heard that, and they would have understood that Jesus was needling them. I didn't come to call you righteous folks. I came to call sinners, right? I mean, the idea is these people know that they are in spiritual want. You are so ignorant, you don't get it, that you are in spiritual need, that you need a doctor. That's the perspective I think Jesus is taking here. And when he says this middle line, go and learn what this means. I want mercy and not sacrifice. Well, the religious people knew all about sacrifice. They knew all about giving to God. Look what I've given. I tithe. I go to temple regularly. I practice self-denial. They knew about sacrifice. And what Jesus is saying to them is, you don't get it. You have no clue. What I'm really about is mercy, not sacrifice. Not showing me how devoted you are, not showing me how powerful you are. If you're not merciful to other people, if you're not showing love to other people, you've missed the boat. So I think that's the perspective Jesus is taking here. Healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. So what makes you think you're healthy? Go and learn what this means. I want mercy, not sacrifice. I didn't come to call righteous people. I've got buildings full of righteous people, and they haven't made the world any better. This is the perspective I think Jesus is taking here. So I think the next stories simply highlight what Jesus is talking about. So the next stories, he initially gets called to go heal someone or to raise someone from the dead, raise a daughter from the dead. And as he's going, a woman who's bleeding touches him and finds herself transformed. And part of the power in that story is that she doesn't wait for Jesus to bring her healing. She goes and takes it. There's a lot more we could talk about that. Thank you, Teresa. Teresa said she drains his mana. He sees the blue meter go down, right? Oh, what happened? So, but I think the powerful thing is there that she goes and takes what she needs instead of, passively waiting and hanging back and being subservient. The spirituality that Jesus is talking about here is one in which sin is not understood as a value that human beings have. Like, it's not that some of us are bigger sinners than others. It's that we all need healing, that we all need transformation. I wanted to include the Barbara Brown Taylor quote today because she talks about that neither healing nor law are adequate to really describe what sin is. But in this passage, I hear Jesus telling people who are very concerned about law to think about sin in terms of sickness instead. That it's something that affects all of us. We all experience sickness. We all need healing. And that in the Jewish understanding, tikkun olam, the healing of the world, is what God is after. God is after this mending of all of creation. And so Jesus there as the physician isn't going to waste Jesus's time with religious people who only understand sin in terms of being ratings of quality and what people deserve. That Jesus is there to heal people, to mend what is broken. So I'm going to stop there, and I would invite those of you who are listening for your own comments, reflections, thoughts about this passage. Yeah.
I have a friend who recently was doing a pilgrimage, one of the journeys, the Camino. She shared something that she had a conversation with somebody online about, and I just want to read it because it's kind of been percolating on my mind all week, or since she wrote this, and it is very relevant to what somebody basically she shared something that said, if God didn't send Jesus into the world to condemn it, I doubt he sent you. And someone else had said, it's called accountability. You should call people's sin out with respect and love. You can't just let your brother keep stumbling. So just to have the context that she just was on this journey. She said, do you think, though, that if people are sinning, they don't know it, or that they think that no one else knows? Once you've called out a person's sin, what do you think will happen after that? Since you call it stumbling, who stumbles willingly or on purpose? I was recently on a long walk with a heavy pack on uneven ground. There were rocks sticking out on the pack, and every so often I stepped askew on one of them. And on 2 occasions, I lost my balance entirely, and my pack tipped me over further rather than letting me catch myself, so I scraped my legs. And then I found it hard to stand up again. I needed help from the people near me. And that help wasn't, hey, you fell over. Yeah, I did. You know, I keep seeing you lose your footing, right? Yes, I know. You need to stop falling over. Yeah, don't I just? Are you going to give me a hand up and then help steady me on my feet so I don't go over again? Or are you just going to make sure that I feel really bad about it instead? And I just was like, wow. Oh, wow. Like, anyway, I wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and you know, it puts me in the mind that there's when we talk about sin, there's a lot that we don't talk about. You know, and what I think what people have experienced from especially the North American church is that, you know, it's easy to talk about people who are below you in status. It's easy to talk about their sin. Whereas the people who are above you in power and status, you're not allowed to talk about their sin. You know, you're not allowed. It's considered impolite to or controversial or divisive to talk about the sins of, you know, the fact that we incarcerate more people than anyone else on the planet. Like, no one's calling that sin. Yeah, it's easy to talk about the people you imprison. Oh, their sin, right? Stealing, robbing, dealing drugs, but not about the fact that we incarcerate more people than anyone. So whose sin is that? Anyway, that's the thing that pisses me off. All right, go ahead, Rob.
I mean, I think that's addressed here too, right? Like in the way Jesus speaks of this, I see there's this. I mean, so you know, you've talked in the past about the inappropriateness of some of our use of sacrifice language, right? And what I see, you know, so you were talking about Jesus pointing out sort of implicitly this, like, whoa, you think you act like you don't need me, so why would I bother? Right.
Yeah.
And so I mean, go learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're being set up in opposition to each other. So really about, it's not just the sacrifices that you are consciously performing. It's about the sacrifices that you are unconsciously performing as well. And that I don't want those either.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people you're willing to throw away.
Yeah.
Those people to be sacrificed. I want those people to be shown mercy. I think he's making that very, very explicit. So, you know, it's saying all those people you're incarcerating, that's not a sacrifice, you morons. That's your sin.
Oh, that's good, Rob. Well, and I think you're right. I mean, here it's clearly we're willing to sacrifice all these people to throw away these tax collectors and sinners. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Shelby?
My entire life, I've known this passage to be used as a means of excluding people. And just as you said, Dave, pointing out, they're sick. This is why you need to come to church, because you're sick and you need to get in here and get your healing and therefore become like us, which is better, righteous, then in a position to point out how other people need Jesus because they're also no good. And how different would this world be? How different would people experience, or should I say, would more people experience a relationship with Jesus versus religion if we said, we are the sick? We are the sick. Like, hey, come over here and hang out with those of us who are both broke, busted, and disgusted as well. Like, we don't get it right. None of us have it right. So you might as well hang out with those of us who are also tax collectors, so to speak. I just think that it speaks to, I've since I've been at St. Junia's, St. Junia also, I think the one thing that I have, among the many things I've learned, is also to take into context Jesus's words in addition to what he was doing at the time. So he's saying this, but also what is he demonstrating? He's demonstrating not this hierarchy, but this being among people. And also, I notice that we continue in modern religion to take that and say, we're going to go out and be among you to change you. We're going to go to the Pride Parade and hand out pamphlets that still tell you how you're sick and going to hell, because you're a member of this community. So I think if we put aside we're here to change you, no, we're here to be among you because we are you. Period. We are you. We are not well. We need Jesus. All of us need Jesus, because if we are going to transform this world, we have to transform it together and collectively through mercy, not through sacrifice, not through being better, not through pointing out to other people how their pat keeps tipping them over. Very, very impactful. And I don't know what all the answers are on how we do it, but I just think it starts with just demonstrating that we're no better.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Shelby. I do think, I mean, I'll say that as I got into church planting, like the training that I went through, the institutional church understood church planting, most of it, to be, we want to go get people who are out there and make them like the people who are in here. Like, here's the behaviors you need to be doing to be a Christian. You need to be attending worship weekly, and you need to be tithing, and which, I mean, hey, by the way, those are great things. But there's all this stuff that's like, we want to make you like us. and that the goal of the church is to make those people out there like us. And that's part of colonialism. That's part of why that got so cozy with evangelicalism. And I think it completely misses the mark. Absolutely. That the idea is I need to change you to be more like me because I'm well and you're obviously sick. I think that's part of that implicit judgment. Anyway, yeah. Go ahead, Miller.
Yeah, I think this sort of, I don't know, something I see in the image of both Jesus coming to Matthew's house to eat and, hang out with his friends too. And also in the image of the woman with the issue of blood coming and like just touching, like she doesn't even ask, she's sort of, I think Jesus is pleasantly surprised by her because she gets that she doesn't have to ask. She gets that all of this goodness, this healing is supposed to be kind of a communal resource, and the like with the tax collectors, they actually came, to dinner. Like they didn't, I don't know, you can imagine like the guilt and what have you that like they all would probably have being confronted, like Matthew's like, hey, I met this guy, he told me to give up my job. You also do this job. Why don't you come talk to him at my house? And I don't know, there is this willingness to come and set aside the hierarchy of like, please, Lord Jesus, help me, Yeah. And I think the Pharisees don't understand that also,
Right. It's almost like the healing is a scarce resource and we have to parcel it out and deliver it in these particular channels. And I think that's what
like, why are you helping the worst of the worst?
Right.
You can help these people over here that aren't that bad,
Yeah. We need to triage this, Jesus. Don't give healing to those. They're already gone. Just absolutely. Right. She bypasses the line. She doesn't get in line. I think that's part of the about this is, and I like the way you said it, Miller, like this healing power is a communal resource. Even though it's coming through Jesus, it's not like he contains it. It just flows out of him. It's not like he's measuring it out. Okay, here's some for you and here's some for you. And I think that's also when you get to like the feeding of the 5,000, it's like there's 12 baskets left over. It's not like we were running short. The idea is there's this just tremendous abundance. And there's no point in parceling it out to people who deserve it. Anyway. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
So Victoria's made some excellent comments on Facebook that I want to share, but to lead into that, I just want to say, like, there is this, it's funny to me how much people will perform the I'm not okay, you're not okay dance in evangelical kind of theology, right? Like, oh, I'm just a lonely sinner, but it's like, I don't think they believe the words that are coming out of their mouth, right? And maybe it's only unconscious. Maybe they think they believe it, right? And the issue is really, what do they think the sickness is? They think the sickness is to not have exactly the right beliefs, which they have decided upon or have been handed to them. And like, there it is, right? And I think what Jesus is making explicit here is that the sacrifice, the willingness to sacrifice these people, whoever they are, is the sickness. The lack of mercy itself is the sickness, which is what folks miss. So here's Victoria. As we talk about the incarcerated, we must acknowledge that 80% of them in our state, Alabama that would be, are disabled.
Yeah.
This is the ableist society we live in. Would Jesus really lock away the disabled and then place blame and punishment? Would he do that without care and treatment? This speaks to the values of the church in our community. This leads me to remember the many times we have seen medical doctors who wanted to fix our kid, or the church people who believe the only fix is a cure. And without that, our son isn't worthy of inclusion. Yes, Dave, they believe they have to make others like them because they see themselves as the perfection to judge others by. Guess how much churches do for the sick and disabled? Little to nothing on a daily basis, because we must have done something to deserve our place in life.
Yeah. I'm one of the most powerful things I heard about mental health care was that the biggest provider of mental health care in Alabama is the prisons. And, I mean, mental health care, right? Most of the people who are behind bars have adverse childhood experiences too. I mean, it's like, you're dealing with trauma compounded. And there is no, I mean, again, to me, that's the healing part, that part of our job as human beings and as followers of a God of love is that we are healers, that we are attempting to mend things and not, as you pointed out, Rob, sacrificing people. Anyway, thank you for that. Other comments, insights, reflections?
I'll just quickly add that I've been recently struck as well as new, so like mental health crisis stuff getting funded here, tiny home villages trying to help people with transitional housing and get unhoused people housed, affordable housing getting opened up. Like every time this stuff gets announced, there's news articles and things, you see these commenters come out of the woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another flavor of people that folks are very willing to sacrifice. Like the thought of just giving folks something they need in order to put a floor under them so that it's, like Teresa's talking about, like, the whole idea of helping someone not stumble instead of just pointing out this very obvious fact that they have done, right? The psychology though that people are up against there, I mean, I don't know, like I said, it's another flavor of the same thing, and I've been seeing it here recently very obviously, so I thought I'd point it out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I kind of use shorthand for this. I call that the theology of deserving. It's this whole idea of, I mean, and when it comes to the idea, God throws that out the window. I mean, it's people don't get what they deserve, period. Like none of us, there's no deserve. And even saying we don't get what we deserve almost reifies the idea of deserving. Like deserving doesn't matter. It's like, if I go out and I'm working in the garden, I don't say this plant deserves this because it's really trying, I mean, if it's got the conditions to thrive, it will thrive. If I'm not watering it, it's not the plant's fault. and I wish we would look at people, and I realize we have supposedly volition. I think we have a lot less volition than we think we do, but if you give something what it needs to thrive, it will thrive. And this whole idea of deserving is crap. I just feel like it doesn't make sense. I want to read a comment from YouTube. Author says, hearing the become like me thing reminds me of a thing that happened to me. A ministry was so welcoming and then slowly stopped using my name and pronouns. Then they started confronting me about how I was still openly trans and hadn't given up my gender identity. Yeah, I mean, the bait and switch is strong in churches. We accept everybody. We just accept you after you change. So I'm sorry you had that experience, and that's something that we recognize as a dirty trick that churches play on people. Yeah, Shelby?
Yeah, I was assimilation in church. Oh my gosh, we could talk about that for days and days and days. At least I can. I was really struck by Victoria's comments about, people who are sick or disabled in churches, and how they're essentially not accepted. And I think it's because it causes church as a collective to say we can't do everything.
Mm.
And church positions themselves, or some churches or a lot of churches position themselves as we have all the answers here. And when you cannot answer the question of why is someone sick, it is a fact of life. Bodies are not perfect. Bodies break down. Mental illness is real. And when we can't answer those things or fix them, it then makes people say, well, okay, that makes us look flawed in the church. And we can't be flawed. Remember, we're perfect. We're not sick. We don't need healing. You all need healing. And so I think there's just a whole conversation that needs to be had about why the church can't just say we don't know. We don't know. We can't fix everything. There's no answer to some things. It is what it is. But that's okay, right? Like, and I don't know. It's sad to me that people continue to be hurt because we can't say we don't know.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Shelby, too, especially about the ideas that we don't have the power. Like,
we don't.
So I can't miracle this away.
Right.
And as though that something's wrong with, so either something's wrong with God, or there's something wrong with our theology or us. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
You're blowing my mind, Shelby. Like that, I just connected that also with the very frequent impulse coming from that section of thought, right? To advocate that the church should be the source of all help, all charity, right? You don't need the government to do any of that. We don't need taxes to pay for any of that and make sure everyone has access, that there's enough. No, the church. So they've got this investment in the idea that the church is supposed to be doing this because they've got this libertarian delusion going on. And then they've got this theological constitution where it's like, well, our beliefs have to be totally right or we have nothing. Like, yeah, you blew my mind. You explained everything.
That's absolutely, that's a great insight. I think that's very true. Yeah. Oftentimes the church wants to make itself the idol, like we can fix all of society's problems. And I mean, I'll admit to having bought into some of that. I mean, I remember I used to love church is the hope of the world. And to some extent, I think there's truth to that, in that I think God incarnate in human community is what we're longing for. But I think that kind of we are the savior mentality is really toxic. Yeah, it's really, really dangerous.
I want to read Victoria's comment here on this. She responded to Shelby as well, saying, yes, we had a pastor tell us that, quote, we don't know what to do because your crisis is forever and we don't know how to serve in that way. Truth.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I appreciate the conversation today. Again, and appreciate each of you and what you bring. Thanks for comments and what y'all have shared. Let's go ahead and turn back to the liturgy, and we will wrap up for the day. Okay, when y'all are ready.
Okay. May you be blessed forever, Lord, for not abandoning me when I abandoned you. May you be blessed forever, Lord, for offering your hand of love in my darkest, most lonely moment. May you be blessed forever, Lord, for putting up with such a stubborn soul as mine. May you be blessed forever, Lord, for loving me more than I love myself. Amen.
God is love. Nothing is wasted. All things shall be well. Go in peace.
So thank you again for tuning in today, especially if you're tuning in on Facebook or YouTube. If you wouldn't mind just clicking like or leaving a comment with where you're watching from, that gives us a way to count you. Appreciate your attendance with us today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the live stream. If you're on Zoom, you can stick around for